Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast, Knowing Your Applicants, How to Stay Current to Best Assess Your Cyber Applicants. My name is Carol Auth of SANS, and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speaker is Kevin Garvey, SANS Associate Instructor. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenter, please enter them into the questions window at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to Kevin.
Thank you so much, Carol. I really am excited to talk about this topic because it's something that I'm going through consistently as I'm looking for the best candidates in the industry to join my team where I am. And I know it's a competitive industry to be in, cybersecurity, but it's also one that requires a lot of extra due diligence in order to get into the industry as of right now. Obviously, things are starting to change a little bit with that, and I'm hoping that with this webcast series, it also enables all of us from the HR perspective, from the cybersecurity perspective, from that leadership perspective, to bring in the right people in the right roles to make them successful and also your team successful as well. So I'm really excited to talk about the topics today in this HR webinar series. But before that, a little bit about myself. So my name is Kevin Garvey and I am an IT security manager. Under my umbrella, there are many operational security functions that I ultimately report to and report about. Is vulnerability management, security operations center, incident response, a little bit of threat intelligence as well. We also have privileged access monitoring, incident response, everything under the umbrella of security operations falls under my court. Well, I require a lot of great knowledge and personality on the team to make sure that our group is as successful as possible. I also am an associate instructor for the Management 512 Security Essentials for Managers SANS course. And I have loved teaching this course over the years because it's given me insight into some of the real world problems that come over to the classroom, whether it be some of the technical concerns that folks bring in, whether it be from their management or maybe they are managers, or it could also be from other folks who are just joining the cybersecurity industry. I love hearing about some of those day-to-day and also strategic issues that we work through together as a class. And one of them is finding talent. And almost always, whenever I bring up that talent conversation in Management 512, almost everybody can raise their hand and say, hey, I've experienced something like that, whether it's building my team or even getting into the industry as well. Part of my experience includes working in the cybersecurity functionality within the media industry, financial, and also some of the utility sectors. And I have done countless interviews for folks to join my team and also other teams within a security group as well, whether that be through governance, risk, and compliance, security architecture, or even project management functions that align to cybersecurity. I also volunteer and mentor with other cybersecurity groups outside of SANS to start cultivating some great talent into the industry. And one thing that I have really enjoyed with being able to volunteer is that I'm able to see that there are so many great applicants that have the ability to get into the cybersecurity world, and sometimes they're not 100% sure how to get in. On the other side, maybe we who are in the industry aren't fully sure about how to get them into the industry as well, which is another great topic that we've been talking about during this webcast series. So today, we're going to be talking about three things in particular. We're going to be looking at industry agnostic approaches to adding some evaluation to the candidates that you do see coming into your organization, especially the ones that are applying. We're going to also look at some industry specific ways that you could evaluate, in particular, cybersecurity talent. And then lastly, we're going to look at that first line. Many of us who are on this bridge right now are most likely sometimes aligned to cybersecurity, other times not aligned to cybersecurity at all. But we are also responsible for making sure that we get the right talent in the right organization. And that's not just to make sure that the organization is as secure as possible, but it's also to make sure that the hiring manager, the person who ultimately this person would be reporting up to, also is not only successful, but fills the role and the job description accordingly. So we're going to go into a little cheat sheet for you if you're not aligned to cybersecurity that allows you to get a little bit more confidence when you start speaking to candidates that come into the door. Well, we take a step back and we look at some of the problems that we see within the job aggregation and pulling in people into the cybersecurity field. Not only do we have a lot of folks that really aren't sure how to get into the field, we have the other side of the issue as well, where we have a lot of different resumes that fly in whenever a job description is posted. Well, when we look at how great and also how concerning of a problem that is, a few different things are taken away. One, and this is something that I have been dealing with, especially with some of the new roles that I've been posting in my organization. I'll post a new role, and then all of a sudden I find out after talking to my HR department that we have maybe over 300 applicants. And in fact, the standard, according to Inc.com, it's about 250 resumes for every job description across industries, not just within cybersecurity, that are submitted over to especially HR, first line recruiting type departments. And out of all of that, only about 4 to 6 candidates will be called in for an interview. And that's a lot of time and effort to go through 245 or so resumes that you're not ultimately going to move on to the next round, right? That's a lot of work. So we're going to look at some ways that we can start looking at a little bit past the resume and helping to figure out how we can bring the best talent into the organization. Resumes can be wordy too. I was looking at a resume the other day, and this individual had a lot of great certifications, a lot of great experience. However, it was a long resume to go through. And the first thing I thought of was, well, if I were to be somebody who is screening 250 resumes, and I'm looking at a resume that has potentially 450 to 700 words in it, of course, I'm looking for certain keywords along the way, which, some applicant tracking systems do a little bit of that for you. But it does require that human touch sometimes. Many of them are filled with acronyms that, especially for those who are not aligned to the cybersecurity industry, can be really overwhelming at times. Might not know what some of those acronyms are. We might not understand if they're actually good for the role as well. I think to some organizations, they have very particular acronyms that have to do with their own organization. It's not really something that fits in very well to maybe the organization and the job description. And that's just one example of how confusing it could be, especially for those who aren't aligned to cybersecurity, to be that first line and to look through all the resumes and to really find that diamond in the rough who's going to be absolutely fantastic at that role. So how do you find some of that top talent when you see all this noise? Well, there are a lot of very interesting ways that, not only in the industry, but also outside of the industry as well, we might be able to start tackling this problem. And we could start with looking at some applicant screening ideas. And something I talked about in the first webcast when we were thinking of creative ways to bring individuals into the cybersecurity industry is that we're just looking for some of those hard skills. Of course, we might be able to go after someone who's been in the incident response field for the last 5 or 6 years or so. That person's going to have most likely a lot of really great hard skill experience. But there's also a lot of folks that are just trying to get into the industry, whether they're doing a pivot from another role, maybe they're reskilling themselves into cybersecurity, or they're just trying to get into an industry and they really wanted to get into the cybersecurity industry. Well, some of those skills that are assessed could be more skills-based as opposed to looking at some of the hard skills. So some things that the applicant screening processes can go through is we can look at what the problem-solving abilities are. We might be able to look at some of the other non-hard skill abilities, such as critical thinking and other foundational items. And I think back a little bit to when I was hiring for somebody who was a little bit junior, and it was a junior role. It was a little bit tough for me to understand what some of the hard skills this individual would be able to bring to the table. But I took that away and I took a step back and I thought to myself, I remember when I was 21, trying to get into the industry and really didn't have any hard skills that were due to professional experience. It was all due to a lab environment or it was due to learning in school. Well, I needed to really showcase myself in another way. This individual needed to showcase themselves in another way as well. So what I ended up doing is I started thinking of other ways to assess this candidate, not with the hard skills, because I knew, and that other individual knew, they don't have those hard skills just yet. But it is something that we could potentially teach in the role. And a lot of that hands-on experience allows the right candidate to be able to start picking up some of those hard skills and filling those hard gaps within the role. But could I teach some of the great problem-solving skills? Could I teach some critical thinking? Well, I wanted to see if the candidate was able to have that ability coming into the role. So one thing I was able to do is start looking at some talent assessment examples. Now, some of you, especially those who are in the HR world, are probably somewhat familiar with some of the industry agnostic assessment tests that are in use within many of the job descriptions and in the world as well. But we're going to go into all of these, but I wanted to showcase that there were two different types that we might be able to move forward with as we're assessing candidates. One is that industry agnostic assessment type. So we're going to start talking about Myers-Briggs and Strength Finders. In Myers-Briggs, well, this allows the candidate, and of course it could be something that is requested or required from that HR department, to do a bit of a self-report, a bit of a questionnaire, and it starts going into some of the psychological preferences of how people make decisions. And as we look in cybersecurity, why is that important? Well, if we're an incident response or we're looking at someone who is just joining from a security operations center expectation, well, that individual really is going to have a critical thinking hat. And they're also going to have to be a leader in their own right? They're going to have to be analytical. And these are things that we could probably pull out and distill from, well, we can't distill from the resume, but we might be able to distill from some of these industry agnostic tests. We're going to go through what a Myers-Briggs type indicator might look like in the next few slides. Another one that I have loved working with, and in fact, I've loved working with this with one of the volunteer organizations that I have been aligned to over the last few years, is the Clifton Strengths, or just the Strengths Finder. And what this is this is a group, and this is a methodology that allows individuals to start finding what their strengths are. And at the end of this evaluation, you come out with 5 key strengths, and this is out of 34 strength themes. Now, again, this is for non-cybersecurity, industry agnostic. That means we can absolutely use it for cybersecurity. It just is not just for cybersecurity. So I also wanted to showcase some other things as well that are a little bit more aligned to cybersecurity that would allow you in HR or hiring managers to figure out how you can assess your candidates. And we're going to go into some of the commercial cyber aptitude tests. This is from IBM, the SANS Cyber Talent Assessment, and then CyberScore as well. So let me get started with the Myers-Briggs Breakdown. And when somebody takes a Myers-Briggs Breakdown, they're essentially put into a category that you see on the right. And it is a comparison that is a self-assessed comparison. So again, this is the person who is applying for the role who would be able to take this assessment, and they would be able to fill it out and come out with an assessment at the very end. So they look at extroversion versus introversion, sensing versus intuition, thinking versus feeling, and then judgment versus perception. And after you take all of these questions, you get a really nice report that not only goes to the applicant, but it also goes over to the HR department as well, or the hiring manager. Now, how could you utilize this to start finding some of the top talent within your cyber crew and organization, and also the folks that are applying for roles? Well, it's actually up to you. It's up to the hiring manager. It is up to the folks that are going to be making the decision. Now, I've utilized this in the past, and I think back to that conversation I just had with the junior individual who was trying to get into cybersecurity. Again, just to recap, I knew that this individual did not have the hard skills, but I wanted to understand what type of other skills, those skills that are soft, that they might be able to bring to the table. So this individual took the Myers-Briggs Breakdown, and they showed up as an executive. So if we look down at the bottom of the screen, we showcase that they are outgoing and dependable, very systematic as well. And as I took a look back, I brought this up with the rest of my team, how I was making hiring decisions. And I said, I think this candidate with the soft skills that this person has would really make a great entry-level security operations center position and fill that role successfully. And we came to an agreement, and we utilized the Myers-Briggs Breakdown in order to do that assessment. Ultimately, everybody agreed, and we hired that person. The person's still employed 5 years later at that organization and has grown within the organization, and in particular within the cybersecurity ranks. So again, you could take this, whether it's from an HR position or from a cybersecurity or hiring manager position, and you could utilize it to fill the roles that you feel is best. There's no right or wrong answer as to what you're trying to fill, but at least you get some of that information directly from the candidate in their own mind as to how they might be able to really fit a great but also specific role within your organization and within cybersecurity as well. Another one, again, industry agnostic, is that strength finders breakdown. Again, I loved doing this when I was volunteering with the organization that was trying to get folks into not only a cybersecurity job, but it could have been IT, it could have been media, it could have been finance, and they were trying to figure out what exactly they, quote unquote, wanted to do in the role that they were going to be in. What were they going to be successful at? And after taking the test, there were 5 different themes that came out. Now, within the screen, you'll see that there are the 34 different breakdowns. And out of those 34, again, that individual, the person who's applying for the role, after they take this test, would then go down to 5 or so. Now, if we think about what we, again, are trying to get after in terms of who we're hiring, and sometimes they may have the hard skills, sometimes they don't. We can utilize something like the Strength Finder breakdown to really figure out, hey, what are the true soft skills? What are the other things that really can make a candidate incredibly successful? Well, what do they bring to the table? Do they bring that relationship building aspect? Do they bring strategic thinking? I think of influencing, great example of how influencing is so important within cybersecurity is in the vulnerability management. Vulnerability management requires us to not only work internally as a group and have great data and analytical skills, but we also have to influence some of the other teams outside of our cybersecurity group as well. We might have to, well, influence or at least have conversations with our remediation teams. It could also be with the folks that are hands to keyboard as well. We really have to ensure that the people who are effectively not running, but also trying to execute what we have laid forward with vulnerability management, well, we have to influence them. We have to make sure that they want to do what we're asking them to do. And many things in cybersecurity require us not to just lay down the gauntlet, but we actually have to influence. And to bring someone in who is going to be an influencer, but again, doesn't have some of those hard skills, well, that might be a really good way of bringing somebody into the industry and somebody who could really fill the role that you need to fill as well. Now, just like with Myers-Briggs, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. This is something that you'd work with whether your HR department or your cybersecurity department or the hiring manager to figure out what exactly you're trying to get after. What is the role, and not just those hard skills that you're trying to fill. It could be, a junior level individual. It also could be somebody who's very senior, somebody who is an executive. And we need to figure out how they're going to match in within the organization as well. How are they strategic? How are they looking at dominating and making things very successful from that top level standpoint? Well, it's a great way of really distilling some of the skills that are very hard to put on a resume and really bringing it out into something that's not only reportable, but actionable, especially with your hiring managers and your cybersecurity team. Now we're going to shift over from some of the industry agnostic tests, and we're going to start talking about something that's a little bit more cybersecurity related. We're going to go through 3 different things that are aligned to cybersecurity, but you're going to find the theme here. They're going to start talking about not just some of the hard skills, but they're also going after some of the exact same skills, well, that some of the other tests, those industry agnostic tests, we're also going after. So the first one we're going to talk about is the Commercial Cyber Aptitude Test. And this is something from IBM, and it's looking for that underdeveloped ability. Think of it a little bit like a flower. It's trying to figure out exactly what is planted, what can absolutely blossom, what skills does a person have that could really flourish in a role. Well, how is it something that aligns to not just the cognitive and behavioral attributes of the role, but then how does it help them acquire some of that technical knowledge to be successful in a cybersecurity role? I actually utilized one of these tests a few years ago in order to sort of build upon the Myers-Briggs or Strength Finders test, those industry agnostic tests, and got a little bit more into something that was aligned to cybersecurity. And it was a great test, and I utilized this for some of the junior roles that I was filling, and in particular for a security operations center role. And what was great is that it allowed me to not only figure out, again, we weren't looking at the hard skills as much for something a little bit more junior, but we were looking for some of those critical skills that are so important within cybersecurity. And really, no matter if somebody has the hard skills or does not have the hard skills, ultimately makes them very successful within the cybersecurity industry. So a quick example below, we started looking at some of the scales. We looked at personality, error detection, also looked at pattern matching as well. And we matched it over to a category. We looked at behavioral versus ability. And we started looking at other ways we could really figure out, hey, what does this candidate truly bring to the table that's a little bit outside of that resume? Think back to, you set up a job description, there are on average 250 resumes that come pouring on in, and you have to bring it down to about 4 to 6, and ultimately one person fills the role, right? Well, what are some of those more creative ways to make sure that you're getting that top talent into your organization? Well, here's just one way that's a little bit more aligned to the cybersecurity industry and some of the analytical thinking that is required for a role and a person in this role to be very successful. There's another great program from SANS, and it's called SANS Cyber Talent. And I've had the pleasure of getting to know this program a little bit more, and I really have enjoyed everything that it has to offer. So a little bit of background on SANS Cyber Talent really has two main focus areas. It's looking at some targeted training, and in particular, there are 3 areas that really are a huge focus for some of the targeted training from SANS. That is a SANS Vet Success Immersion Academy, Women's Immersion Academy, and then the Cyber Workforce Academy. And these are groups that are, well, starting to build up much of their talent and much of their skill sets through the SANS courses. And it's been great really hearing some of the wonderful stories of folks who have been hired based on those 3 particular academies right off the bat. And then starting to figure out how to assess them based on the SANS Cyber Talent curriculum and program that SANS offers. But it also has another focus area, and it's the employer focus area, where we could start looking at identifying and assessing talent during recruitment. And again, very thematic of what we're talking about today is, hey, how do we really assess the right person to fit this role and to be a long-term success within the role and the organization? It also helps out with a few other items as well, looking at building professional development and retention plans for current employees. Now, retention plan is going to be something I'm going to be talking about in another webinar, because there is that other problem in the industry. Once you finally get your top talent in the industry, sometimes it's a little bit tough to keep them in the role because this is such a competitive market. Well, this is something that SANS Cyber Talent is aiming to start providing some solutions against. Hire trained and certified cybersecurity talent, and then creating that customized cybersecurity hiring program, which for those who have started looking for people to fill roles within cybersecurity, you know, it's certainly not a one-size-fits-all approach within cyber. Somebody who has vulnerability management expertise may not really fit into an incident response role, clearly, right? And vice versa. Somebody in incident response may be sort of bored over in vulnerability management. Somebody in architecture, well, they might not want to be aligned to an operations role, and vice versa. Well, there's a lot of different things that, again, the cyber talent group from SANS can start working on in order to make sure that the candidate you're bringing in not just fits all the check boxes, but then also fits that next step as well. But before we even get into the next step, let's figure out, how do we identify, how do we assess talent during the recruitment phase? So there's a few different things that I'm going to go over that have to do with the SANS Cyber Talent Assessment. And there are a few different areas for the assessment that I have on the screen. We're going to delve into 2 of them, but one of them starts with aptitude, and we're going to, again, that's that theme that we've been talking about. What are those more soft skills as opposed to the hard skills that somebody brings to the table for a cybersecurity role? And again, it doesn't have to be just an entry-level role. It could be a little bit more of a, let's call it a senior role, especially somebody who has some technical skills outside of cybersecurity as well. Also, Cyber Talent Enhanced, where we're looking at not only understanding some of that aptitude, about 50%, but then we're going to start delving into some of those more hard skills and really making that true assessment as to what that individual might be able to bring to the table. And again, no right or wrong assessment. It's just an assessment that allows you, that hiring manager, to really figure out who you are bringing into your organization and to really read through and to scrape through all of the resumes that you do have and get down to the right person. There's other assessments as well that we're not going to delve into, but of course, it's something I'm going to talk about on the blog a little bit. And I'm going to have a reference on my blog once I'm done with this webcast for cyber defense, penetration testing, application security, digital forensics, cloud, industrial control systems, and then also InfoSec, or info security management. These are all assessments that are not only offered through SANS Cyber Talent, but really give you, that hiring manager or HR, a good indication as to what skills this individual could not only bring to the table from some of their previous experience, but then also their future experience as well, which I know is not grammatically correct, but it really makes a very good dent into trying to figure out how somebody is going to be a future success within your organization, and especially within cybersecurity as well. So we're going to delve into two of these assessments, and one of them is the Aptitude Assessment. Well, again, what's the theme that we've been talking about? Whether it's industry agnostic or even industry-based assessments, you'll notice that, again, we're not having a regimented technical conversation as of yet with the applicants that are coming into a role. We're really trying to assess how they can be successful in the role with and or without some of that hard skill knowledge. So what does the aptitude test go after? Well, it goes after identifying high potential talent. This could be a natural ability. Again, everyone's looking for that high achiever, somebody who has a high potential, and there's a lot of great candidates out there. We also have to keep in mind, though, and something I talked about on the first webcast, well, some of our job descriptions can be a little bit too detailed. And when they're too detailed, it might scare off some folks that really would do quite well in this aptitude test, but they might not have even had the chance to get there because we really didn't have the right words, the right nomenclature within the resumes to bring the talent back over to our queue, and then also to look at how we can be successful in bringing the right people as well. So what is this going after? It's going after the capacity to be an achiever in security. So again, we're thinking well into the future as we start looking at identifying high potential talent. Looking at elements of potential success in cyber. This could be a few different things. It could also include technical comprehension. You know, I keep talking about those soft skills versus hard, and I really want to showcase those soft skills. That doesn't mean somebody who's coming to the table with a really great technical acumen might not be incredibly successful. Maybe they just have the mindset right now of a non-cyber professional. They're an operations professional, or they're a technical troubleshooting professional, or maybe they create, maybe they're coders, but they haven't looked at things from that cybersecurity perspective. Does that mean they're not a good candidate? No, absolutely not. They are a fantastic candidate for the role, but may not fit that job description 100% perfectly. It makes you really think about maybe some of the candidates that we missed along the way, just because they didn't feel comfortable with putting their resume forward for a particular role. And also we have that correlation with the GAC success criteria. And these are based on some of the GAC certifications that are done in conjunction with SANS. And there are many different GAC certifications. And again, I'm going to provide a link in my blog post to the GAC certifications. Again, this is something that's looked at through the aptitude test. What's the next level of the assessment? Well, not only could we look at the aptitude, but we bring it a step further. We start looking at what we can do to assess somebody 50% from aptitude and then 50% from a little bit more of a hard skill. And again, I'm being a little soft here, right? A little bit of a hard skill. Again, we're not looking for someone who has 25 years of cybersecurity experience in the field and maybe potentially owning an incident response. We just want to understand what some of their base knowledge is. And through this cyber talent assessment, we might be able to get through that. And it's called the Cyber Talent Enhanced, or CTE approach, through the SANS Cyber Talent Assessment. So you're going to see 50% of it is based on aptitude, and the other 50% are based on what end up being very simple, or also we'll call it entry-level info security skills. And it could be, well, getting to understand about networking domains or operating systems, communications, network security technologies. You know, we're going to be starting to throw some terms out there that someone within the industry would probably be familiar with. Somebody who's out of the industry or has never had that opportunity to be part of the cybersecurity industry might struggle with along the way. So it's going to be important for us as hiring managers, HR, cybersecurity leaders to figure out exactly what assessment is really going to bring the right candidate. Again, I don't have the answer for you. It's something that's going to be able and to be discussed as you start looking at some of these assessments. And what is the right way of doing it? Again, very, very dependent on the role. But one theme I would love for you to take from this, it doesn't have to be just based on the resume. There are a lot of great ways to figure out, hey, does that candidate offer exactly what we need in order to be successful within the cybersecurity industry? Now, I actually utilized this, and it's been great to utilize it, and I utilized this particular Cyber Talent Enhanced a little bit more for an older generation, where it was for an experienced generation of groups that had come through. So they had about, we'll call it 5 or 10 years of experience, and they did not have a cybersecurity background, but they did have some of those key background components such as operations or infrastructure. And this assessment not only was able to showcase how their mind could absolutely be successful if we were to showcase that aptitude test and think from like a cybersecurity professional, but then also that basic info skill set. And when I say basic info skill set, this is not just something that is only an info skill set. Networking concept domains, not surprisingly, a lot of network admins, people who have been aligned to networking groups, well, they are going to be very successful in this. And we're able to utilize this particular assessment in order to really figure out how somebody who's not a junior in the industry, someone who's got a little bit of experience in the industry, can be just as successful, even if they don't have a cybersecurity, whether it be a degree or a background that would allow them to start moving into the cybersecurity realm. Another one I wanted to touch base on, which I think is really cool, is CyberScore. So CyberScore, if we were to take a step back, this is something that's going to start testing that hands-to-keyboard experience, and it's based on lab environments. And what's cool about this is it looks at a wide range of cybersecurity concepts. Could be firewalls, could be IDSs or IPSs, could be, well, doing vulnerability assessments, but it's all hands-to-keyboard. And CyberScore's grading, well, it's based on lab systems. And it looks for monitoring of changes or looking at what the user is actually doing. Now, what I love about this is you could use this in conjunction with some of the industry agnostic or the industry specific tests that we had just talked about, but this one gives a little bit more of that hands-on. So my recommendation for CyberScore, it's a lot of fun. It's most likely great for someone who maybe has a little bit of experience within cybersecurity or within IT in general, just to understand what their hands-to-keyboard concept and knowledge is. And it gives you a really good indication as to, well, how they might be able to be a little bit more technically professional and successful within the job description and within the role that they're going to be hiring for. One really cool thing about this one too, so this is available not only to government, but it's also available to private corporations as well. I've had the pleasure of working with CyberScore just to figure out exactly, well, hey, how can we figure out from a pure skill assessment if this individual, well, is going to be a great fit for the particular role. I think back to all the things that we talked about, one thing I'd like you to take away, again, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, but these are all different tools that you could put in your toolkit to start figuring out a little bit past the resume how somebody really does have the ability to be successful, to think critically, to be a problem solver within a cybersecurity organization. Let's shift a little bit. Let's talk about, well, we already looked at some of the great ways to assess a candidate, whether it be industry agnostic or we start talking about things that are a little bit more industry specific. But then how on the front lines do we understand those results? And I think back to many of the conversations I've had with HR departments, and they've been wonderful conversations about how do we bring in the right talent. And almost always one of the themes I'll hear is that I'm not totally sure what I'm looking at in terms of the resume, in terms of whether it be some of the results that we just saw from an example of Myers-Briggs, or more in particular in terms of the cybersecurity tool sets and terminologies. Well, how does one, well, not only understand a little bit more about cybersecurity, especially what you're looking for within the role, but then also how do you develop that confidence as someone who's going to be screening resumes day in and day out, week in and week out, to find the right candidate for your cybersecurity team or for your division? Well, it's going to require you to have a little bit of confidence and have that knowledge. Now, no one's asking, especially on the HR side, for you to be a cybersecurity professional. I totally understand that. But I also know at the same time, there is that confidence level that comes with understanding just a little bit about cybersecurity, to have that really good, intelligent talk with someone who you're the first conversation that they're going to have within that organization. How do not only make sure that they understand that you're very serious about cybersecurity, but you can also conduct yourself in a way that showcases, hey, I do know a little bit about the industry. And I can always tell, especially if I'm talking to a recruiter, there are some great recruiters out there who absolutely know some of the great new things that are happening within cybersecurity. And it's great when I start talking to them, because I also know at the same time, they're not day-to-day or even strategically involved within cybersecurity, but they're doing it to really get an understanding of what the candidate is able to bring to the table, to start weeding through some of the candidates who might not have some of the experience for the role, while also now really getting a little bit more involved in the industry. And to be very honest, it's a very fun industry to be a part of as well. So you're always welcome to join us over in cybersecurity, but in the HR side of it, in that frontline side, I really enjoy working with them to just get some of the terminology down. So I'm going to give you a little cheat sheet of a few different things that you can do. So we've all been in this position before, right? Whether it's you're interviewing for a cybersecurity position or another position, you don't really totally understand some of the things that are required of the role. So I made up a bit of a cheat sheet for you, which you could take, how you can get prepared for having a great conversation as you're someone who's on the front line to a cybersecurity professional. So if you needed to prep within 1 hour, for example, holy moly, you got to understand 1 hour's worth of cybersecurity stuff just to have a conversation with someone and to really make that decision as to whether they're going to be a good fit or at least a next step in the process for the cybersecurity team. Well, you can read the SANS Ouch newsletter. And what's great about the Ouch newsletter is it's part of security awareness. So you don't have to worry too much about the technology side of understanding what the newsletter is going after. It just gives you a great general overview of some of the things that, especially within security awareness, are continuing to happen within the industry. And you can have great conversation with your applicant just to, again, not only be confident in yourself, but then also start feeling out what some of their experience is as well. You can also do some very quick internet search. One great example is just doing a quick internet search on, well, the top 10 critical vulnerabilities of 2020. So if you were to do an internet search on that, you would see that there's a lot of vulnerabilities out there from 20 and 20, but there might be one or two that you remember even hearing about. Could even be the Bluekeep vulnerability that came out. And even if it's something that, again, you didn't have any responsibility for, you weren't responsible for remediating it, reporting against it, just in the front line, well, now you could at least have a quick conversation with that person, especially if they come in with a little bit of experience, to figure out, again, how much were they involved, and also showcases to the person who is applying for the role that, hey, HR and also the frontline really has a great knowledge of cybersecurity, really cares about who's coming into this organization. And again, it increases that confidence and allows you to really dig in just a little, just a little into the cybersecurity industry for your conversation. What if you had 2 weeks to prep? Well, one high recommendation I would give is to start listening to some podcasts. In particular, I love Darknet Diaries. Darknet Diaries is a podcast that starts going into, well, what some of the penetration testers have gone through. In particular, there was one episode that I loved listening to. It was about this penetration group that had to get into an organization, but it was a physical penetration test. And they needed to get past some of the security guards, and they needed to finally get up the stairs and into a room. It was great. It reminded me not as much about cybersecurity, but more of like a mystery model or something that allowed me to really start forming my head into thinking about what a penetration tester does, not only for physical security, but then also for cybersecurity as well. And I make this a recommendation because it's a really entertaining way to understand just a little bit about what some of the current events are within cybersecurity, or also just to understand what that mindset is of somebody who is successful within the cybersecurity field, who has done a podcast and really gone through the in the trenches approach to what they've done in order to be successful as well. And you might find as you listen to 1 or 2 of the podcasts, which are, about an hour, they're not too long, but you might have some really good stories and conversations to take back to that person who's applying for a role, those 4 to 6 that you're talking to, but also go in with confidence to showcase, hey, I really understand how you're thinking, and now you can also start thinking about how they are thinking to be successful in that role as well. One last one for the cheat sheet. If you want to prep in a month, you've got a lot of time, you can utilize a white paper or an industry report such as the Verizon Data Breach Report. And I say 1 month because this is a fairly large report, but you'll notice that a lot of cybersecurity professionals read the Verizon Data Breach Report, and we respond to it within the organization. We're looking for what the trends are within the organization or within cybersecurity. What are the threats? What is that next thing that every cyber professional should be looking for, not just within their organization, but in aggregate? And that's what I love about the Verizon Data Breach Report, because you'll also notice too that a lot of journalists tend to not only quote it, but they'll utilize it as they start developing their stories. So if you have a little time, and again, it's probably a month's worth of reading if you're not fully aligned to cybersecurity. Remember it being quite a big document. it does give you a great sense of what is going on within the industry. And again, you really don't have to have very deep technical knowledge to understand all the concepts. Of course, there are some concepts in there that do require just a little of technical acumen, but I have absolute confidence that anyone who would be reading that report could walk out of reading that report, especially with someone they're talking to from the industry who's interested in a job, and state, hey, I really know what you're going through, and hey, I just read the Verizon data breach report, and back in 2019 or back in 2020, these are some of the top things. Hey, candidate, how are you able to help us out based on what I was reading along the way? So what am I getting at here? It's bringing up that confidence. That confidence, again, as someone who's going through all these different resumes, and you have to cull it down to 4 or 6 resumes, and ultimately you are part of the decision process to bring it down to that one. Well, now you have just a little bit of knowledge and a lot of confidence in order to really be successful, to figure out who can be some of the top talent within your organization. And lastly, you can let the cyber team keep you informed. Cybersecurity team, the organizations that I've been in, well, we tend to develop resumes, or we tend to develop newsletters that we give out to, whether it be our own internal group or potentially within the whole organization. And we might be able to help you draft a list of questions for you. Of course, you can keep the questions consistent just to make sure everybody is asking the exact same set of questions, and you can evaluate fairly evenly across them. So some examples, again, they're not very technical. It's just getting the mind going, and it's getting that applicant's mind going as well. For example, how do you keep up with major events in the cybersecurity industry? Someone who's got some experience in the industry would probably be able to talk your ear off with the amount of events that they've had to respond to, or the amount of events that, well, they needed to do a little bit of remediation work on along the way as well. And that will give you a really good sense of not only some of their experience, but then also some of their problem-solving skills, some of their leadership skills, what they bring to the table that is really tough to pull into a resume. Another quick example of a question that you might be able to ask is, well, explain how the cybersecurity industry has evolved ever since your interest in the industry began. And again, I really hone in on interest here, because while some folks don't have all of that years of experience, they may have had a lot of interest in the industry way before they actually had a job title associated with it as well. And if they did, they really most likely had a lot of interest in the industry, a lot of enthusiasm, especially if they wanted to get into it. So you'll hear from them in a way that allows them to showcase their history of the industry, or even lack thereof, or trying to get into the industry, while also understanding what they've been able to follow and how they have followed it throughout the years. Again, it really starts going into pulling in some of those skills that they have with some of those soft skills and giving you a very clear and concise answer. And hey, we're always here to help, right? In the cybersecurity team, we really want to make sure that your job in HR is as seamless and as painless as it comes to trying to pull in some of the best talent that cybersecurity has. So in conclusion, well, there are industry and non-industry specific ways to help identify top candidates within your organization. We talked about Myers-Briggs, we talked about strength finders, we talked about the SANS cyber talent, and also the IBM item as well. And also, we started looking at things that were not commercial offerings, that were not something that was industry agnostic, and just utilizing your own ability to start figuring out how you can gain a little bit of confidence as that first line interviewer as well, to really understand the industry enough to have that good conversation with somebody. And ultimately, while we might be able to train some of the hard skills, I think it's been an industry concern trying to figure out what soft skills truly fit within a cybersecurity role. And some of these approaches that we talked about today, I'd love for you to bring back to the table on Monday morning to figure out if that might be something that your organization could potentially utilize as well. While it is not a one-size-fits-all approach, it is an approach, and it is an approach that allows you to at least get the information that you need, whether you're on the HR side, the decision maker side, cybersecurity, to be successful, to bring the top talent within your organization. And something that I said on the first webinar, I'm going to repeat it again. Look, many want to come into our field, but just don't know how. Open up the door for them. And it's just as true when we're looking at some of the top talent that we would love to see within their industry. Sometimes it does not come through in a resume very clearly, but with some of the tools and approaches we talked about today, you at least have a fighting chance of finding out who you feel is going to be successful within your organization. So with that, Carol, let me hand it back over to you.
All right, thanks for that great presentation. If anyone has any questions for Kevin, please enter them into the questions window now. I'm currently not seeing any, Kevin. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find your CEUs for all completed webcasts by logging into your SANS portal account. Navigate to your account dashboard, then click My Webcasts. You can then download your CEU on the right-hand side of the web page. Well, do you have any closing thoughts you'd like to share, Kevin? I'm not seeing any questions submitted.
No, that's great. Yeah, I'm really excited about having folks join the next 3 Skilling the Gap webinars. So we're going to talk about, well, what if you're not in cybersecurity? Also, we talked a little bit about, how do we make sure once we finally get that great candidate within our organization, what do we do to keep them within the organization? And then lastly, the last webinar of the series is going into transitioning folks who maybe have some great experience but are not aligned to cybersecurity into our cybersecurity industry. So we're going to look at creative ways to land that dream cybersecurity job, even if you don't have that cybersecurity experience, but you have some other great experience that you might be able to bring to the table. So I'm really excited about everyone joining me on the next webinar, and also we'll make sure that everyone has a link to the blog post when I finish creating it and uploading it to SANS. So now I really appreciate the time and everybody's time today. And Carol, thank you very much as well. I'll hand it back over to you.
All right, well, thank you so much, Kevin, for your great presentation, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.